What happens when the mechanism meant to hold power accountable, in the world's largest democracy, finds itself under attack? A systematic attack.
It's a really critical question.
We've just spent time immersing ourselves in, well, a whole lot of sources, insights really, that paint this vivid and honestly quite alarming picture. It's about how the press in India, the Fourth Estate, is being muzzled.
Systematically muzzled, yeah.
So our deep dive today is all about unpacking the maybe surprising ways that legal provisions are being twisted
Uh-huh.
and looking at the real-world impact on journalists and, crucially, what all this means for you, the informed citizen.
And it's a reality that honestly might surprise a lot of people, especially given India's image, its self-perception as this really vibrant democracy.
Right.
But we found that India currently sits at, well, a pretty dismal 151st out of 180 countries on the World Press Freedom Index. This is for 2025.
151st. That's a staggering number. A
Well,
huge shift.
It really is.
Especially when you think, didn't it used to be much higher?
Oh, absolutely. To give you some perspective, back in 2002, India was ranked 33rd.
33rd. So we're talking about a drop of over 100 places. That's not just a slight dip.
Not at all. It's a colossal drop. It puts India firmly in the very serious category for press freedom now.
Lower than some neighbors too, right?
Yeah, lower than Nepal, which is at 90th, and the Maldives at 104th. It's only just slightly above Pakistan at 158th.
Wow. So this isn't just about numbers on a chart, is it? This points to something deeper.
Exactly. It suggests pretty strongly that those foundational pillars of democracy are eroding. And maybe the most worrying part, the very tools designed to protect a free press seem to be the ones now used to undermine it.
Okay, so let's unpack that. When we say tools or mechanisms are being twisted, how does that actually work? How are laws, maybe with okay original intentions, being repurposed like this?
Well, it's a pattern we saw again and again. Laws meant for protection or maybe maintaining public order are being turned into weapons. It's like, imagine using a kitchen knife meant for slicing bread for something much more sinister.
Okay, give me an example.
Take the Sedition law. Section 124A of the Indian Penal Code.
Right, the colonial era law.
Exactly. Inherited from the British Raj, originally designed to crush rebellion against the empire. But now, in 2025,
We're seeing it used against journalists.
widely invoked, yeah, against journalists who dare to criticize the government or people in power. And its vagueness is almost its strength, in a way.
How so?
Because it's so vaguely worded, it allows for really broad interpretation. This makes it a super effective deterrent, not just because the potential penalty is life imprisonment,
Which is huge.
but also because it creates this constant fear, a fear of just being arbitrarily targeted.
And it's not just sedition, is it? There are other legal tactics in play.
Oh, definitely. Criminal defamation is another one we saw used frequently.
So if a journalist writes something someone powerful doesn't like,
Exactly. Even if it's factually accurate, but say bruises an ego or damages a reputation, boom, they can find themselves dragged into court.
and who's using this?
Our sources point to politicians, big business figures, even local strongmen wielding these lawsuits. It feels like such an extreme reaction sometimes, like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. It ties up resources, time.
It basically silences them through legal hassle.
Pretty much, it's very effective at that.
And there was a third one you mentioned, perhaps even more. Well, chilling.
Yes, we absolutely have to talk about the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, the UAPA.
UAPA. Okay, that sounds serious. What was that originally for?
It was meant to target terrorists, people involved in genuinely unlawful activities threatening the state.
But its use has expanded.
Significantly, it's been stretched kind of worryingly to ensnare journalists, especially those reporting on sensitive areas like Kashmir or on Maoist insurgencies.
What makes the UAPA particularly dangerous for journalists?
The really chilling part is a provision allowing detention without bail for up to 180 days.
Half a year without bail.
Exactly. Based on investigation, not necessarily a conviction, it sends a very, very clear message. Step out of line reporting on these topics, and you face severe consequences. It essentially takes journalists out of action.
So these are the legal livers: sedition, defamation, UAPA.
Yeah.
But what's the human cost? What does this actually mean for the reporters on the ground? Our look at cases between 2019 and 2024 showed some pretty stark numbers.
Stark is the right word. We found over 200 journalists were hit with first information reports, FIRs, or lawsuits just in that 5-year period.
Over 200.
And as of May 2025, when we checked, 13 journalists were still behind bars. Tragically, at least one journalist was actually killed during that time frame as well.
These aren't just statistics. Each one is a person, a career.
A life under immense pressure, yeah. Facing incredible risks just for doing their job.
We found one specific case, Supriya Sharma from Scroll.in back in 2020. Her story seemed to really highlight this.
Yes, Supriya Sharma's case is a telling example. She faced an FIR, a police complaint, basically for reporting on food shortages.
Where was this?
In Varanasi, which significantly is the Prime Minister's own constituency. This was during the COVID lockdown.
So she reported people were struggling to get food, and the response was legal action against her.
Precisely. It's a classic case of shooting the messenger, isn't it? Instead of maybe looking into the food shortages she reported, the authorities targeted her.
Which also stops others from reporting similar things, I imagine.
Absolutely. It stifles that crucial information flow, information that could have potentially helped those people she wrote about.
These individual stories are really powerful, but they also point towards something broader, more systemic. This idea of a chilling effect.
That's a huge part of it, this constant legal pressure, the threat of FIRs, the online harassment. It creates a pervasive, chilling effect.
Meaning journalists hold back.
They start self-censoring. They have to think twice, 3 times about every single word, not just for clarity or grammar, but for potential legal blowback.
It sounds exhausting, like walking on eggshells constantly.
It's like navigating a minefield, is how some describe it. One wrong step, intended or not, and you could face serious personal and professional consequences. It really dampens investigative work.
And we heard this directly from journalists too, didn't we? Especially in certain regions.
Yes. The voices from the ground really bring this home. Journalists in Kashmir, for example, face just relentless harassment.
Especially since 2019.
Particularly since the revocation of Jammu and Kashmir's semi-autonomy, then yes. They talk about constant surveillance, summons, provisional detentions. It's just a daily battle for them to report anything critical.
It's hard to even imagine working under that kind of pressure. And the ultimate price.
Yeah.
We learned about Gauri Lankesh. Her story is just devastating.
Gauri Lankesh, yes. A really courageous editor known for being outspoken. She wrote fiercely against communalism, against corruption.
And she was killed for it.
Shot dead outside her home in Bengaluru in 2017. And what's equally disturbing is that years later, the perpetrators are still at large.
Which sends its own message, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About impunity.
A very grim message, yes. That you can potentially silence a critical voice so violently, and justice will be slow, or maybe won't come at all.
And it's not just these high-profile tragic cases, right? The problem is wider.
Much wider. Our analysis showed, for instance, 36 attacks on journalists in 2019 alone. 1 in 5 of those involved murder.
1 in 5.
But beyond the physical attacks, there are countless other instances, many unreported. Rural reporters getting harassed by local officials or powerful figures, women journalists facing horrific gendered abuse online, freelancers bankrupted by legal fees because they lack institutional backing.
It sounds like pressure from all sides.
It really is. A multifaceted onslaught, you could say.
So let's step back a bit. Who is driving this? Who benefits from silencing the press like this?
Well, the most obvious answer is politicians. Across the spectrum, really, from national figures down to local strongmen.
Why? What's their interest?
Control. Controlling the narrative. A free, critical press is a watchdog, right? It exposes things some people would much rather keep hidden: corruption, failures, abuses of power. If you can muzzle the press, you control the story.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's not just direct political action, is it? What about the media landscape itself?
That's another crucial piece of the puzzle. Media ownership in India has become increasingly concentrated.
Meaning fewer owners.
Fewer owners, and often these owners are large conglomerates with deep political connections. They run huge businesses. They might depend on government goodwill.
So they're less likely to allow reporting that might upset those connections.
Exactly. There's very little incentive for a media house owned by a tycoon who's friendly with the government to publish hard-hitting investigations into that same government. It's a conflict of interest baked into the structure.
So economic pressures reinforce the political ones.
Precisely. It leads to a media landscape where truly independent, critical voices can get drowned out by outlets that are maybe more inclined to toe the line.
And then there's the online dimension, the trolls.
Ah, yes, the online armies, sometimes called Yoda or warriors. These groups launch incredibly vicious, coordinated hate campaigns against journalists who are critical.
We're talking about more than just nasty comments, right?
Oh, much more. It's often incitement to violence, doxing, publishing private information, threats against them and their families. It's designed to intimidate, to silence, and sometimes it spills over into real-world danger. It's like a digital mob.
A very unsettling picture. Now, we've focused on India because the scale and the ranking drop are so significant. But is this happening elsewhere in the region?
It's definitely not unique to India, though the situation there is particularly stark. We see similar trends, maybe different tactics, across South Asia.
Like where?
In Sri Lanka, for example, there are concerns about vague new online safety laws that could easily be used to stifle dissent. In the Maldives, journalists report facing bureaucratic hurdles, just making it hard to get information.
Even in Nepal, which ranks higher.
Even in Nepal, yeah. Despite its better ranking, there's a move towards consolidating state media, which always raises flags about government control over the narrative.
So it's a regional trend, but India's situation is particularly worrying because of its size and influence.
Exactly. India is often seen as a democratic benchmark, So when press freedom erodes there so dramatically, it sends ripples across the region and, frankly, globally.
Okay, let's bring this back to our listeners. Why does all this matter to someone maybe listening right now who isn't a journalist, maybe isn't even in India? Why should you care about press freedom there?
Because fundamentally, silencing the press isn't just an attack on journalists, it's a direct attack on democracy itself.
How so?
When the press is muzzled, your access to reliable, unbiased information is compromised. How can you hold power accountable, any power, anywhere, if you don't know what's really going on, if independent voices are suppressed?
It limits your ability to be an informed citizen.
Absolutely. Your ability to make informed decisions, whether it's voting or understanding policies or knowing about issues that affect your life.
And it goes beyond just politics, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. A press that's afraid to dig deep can't effectively expose corporate corruption or environmental disasters or social injustices. Think back to that Supriya Sharma case.
Reporting on food shortages.
Right. That reporting could have spurred of action, maybe saved lives. Instead, the focus shifted to punishing the reporter. So when the press is constrained, it's not just political debate that suffers. It's the public's ability to know about and demand action on all sorts of critical issues.
It's an attack on your right to know, essentially.
Your right to know and your ability to demand better. When media houses go from being watchdogs,
The lapdogs.
yeah, or maybe government cheerleaders, they stop scrutinizing power. They just amplify the official line. And that fundamentally changes the information diet you receive.
Okay, so the picture seems quite grim. Is there any resistance? Are people fighting back?
Yes. And that's important to stress. It's not all doom and gloom. Journalists and media organizations are fighting back, often with incredible courage.
What does that look like?
We've seen really powerful symbolic protests, like Kashmiri newspapers publishing blank front pages, a silent scream, in a way, against the suppression they face.
That's powerful.
And despite the risks, many reporters across India continue to do brave investigative work. Plus, you have media watchdogs, both Indian and international, constantly raising the alarm, documenting attacks, advocating for change.
And what changes are they calling for?
Things like repealing those outdated, easily misused laws like sedition, demanding faster justice when journalists are attacked so there's actual accountability, and trying to diversify media ownership to break that concentration of power we talked about.
Reforms are needed at the top. But what about individuals? What can people listening do?
Well, the real shift, the sustainable change, it really starts with you, with the public. Every time you make a conscious effort to seek out and support independent journalism, maybe subscribing, sharing their work, every time you question the narrative, you challenge misinformation, you become part of the solution.
So it's about valuing and defending that independent voice.
Exactly. It's about empowering the press, giving that watchdog the support it needs to do its job. Ultimately, the government needs to stop the attacks, the courts need to deliver justice, media houses need to find their courage again. But public demand and support for a free press is absolutely vital.
So this deep dive, it's really shown us that press freedom, certainly in India right now, isn't something you can take for granted. It's a daily struggle.
A constant battle, yeah. Laws meant to protect are being used to oppress. Journalists are paying a really heavy price.
But as you said, the story isn't over. There's resistance, there's courage.
Absolutely. As long as there are people willing to seek and report the truth and a public that values it, there's always hope for change.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening.
Hmm.
The next time you're reading the news, watching a report, scrolling through updates, just pause for a second.
Hmm.
Ask yourself,
Hmm.
am I getting the full picture here? The unvarnished truth? Or is this maybe a carefully managed version?
And maybe think, what would it actually take for that balance of power to shift back, for the watchdog to truly roam free, for you to get the information you really need?
It's more than just headlines, isn't it?
It really is. It's about the oxygen that democracy breathes.